Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is episode 331 with Tom Williams of Desert Island Survival. This episode, Tom Williams is going to take us back to our adventure roots. He is the creator and founder of Desert Island Survival and was introduced to me by previous guest Anna Mascaro and said, "You've got to get Tom on the show." And so Tom's business is taking people to desert islands around the world, teaching them the skills they need to survive, and then letting them loose for several days to survive on their own on a tropical deserted island. So one of the things that he has to do is find the perfect island. It can't be too far away from help. It can't be too close to people, or else you'll just see other people and not feel deserted. It has to be this perfect Goldilocks of an island. And there's tens of thousands of islands. So he takes us a little bit through this process for how do you find the perfect island to go and host people for a desert island experience. So we're going to learn some of the skills that you need to survive. He's not going to teach you what they are on the show. He's going to tell you what they are. He's going to tell you the kinds of things that people learn and what it's like to go on one of these desert island experiences. And if I've noticed something, it's that British people in particular seem to have this mystique around castaway situations and desert island survival. And Tom's British. And so, he talks about wanting to do that, to be a castaway as a kid. And so this is sort of fulfilling that childhood dream. He started a business to do something that he's always wanted to do. Before he started this business, though, he was actually in a polar race, a race to the North Pole, and he almost set the world record. He ended up winning the race. He trained for years for it. But this is such a fantastic adventure story. And you can hear why he didn't set the record in the episode. And it's pretty dramatic, I have to say. Very intense adventure story. But I love this story because it totally fits in with my thesis. Tom is self-described as failing at most things in his life before he undertook this polar adventure. And now he has the confidence to start and run something like the Desert Island Survival business that he runs. So Tom's a great storyteller. You're really going to enjoy hearing all about Desert Island Survival. Here is Tom Williams. Tom Williams, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Derek. How are you?
Doing well. And we're going to get into talking about your Desert Island Survival project, business, all the cool stuff you do. But there's a bunch I want to learn about your polar race. Actually, but so let's start with how you got into desert island survival in the first place. Let's just lay that scene first of all.
I mean, I can go back way far. I mean, I guess the place initially, the catalyst for me is from being just deeply discontent working in a standard 9 to 5 job selling software in London, and just always dreaming of more and trying to facilitate something that would give me the opportunity to cut free of that and spend time having adventures, meeting people, being out in nature. I mean, it really evolved over a long period of time. I ended up I looked on the internet and realized it's something that was really underrepresented because, so many people seem to have this childhood desire to be the Robinson Crusoe and shipwrecked on a desert island. And I found that there was hardly anyone really doing it. And I went on a trip run by a company I won't mention, but and it was good, but I just was like, this is falling way short of my expectations. And on the back of that, I was able to curate an experience that represented what I wanted to happen. And yeah, that really is how it ended up coming to be. We set up the company in 2016, so it's still in its infancy and young.
So you went on this trip, and then you went and did your own trip in a way that was what you actually wanted?
Yeah, I mean, the trip I went on, so for me, like, it's about getting deep into nature, feeling somewhere where humans aren't aren't really present, and that it's, you know, it's a domain of the natural world. And we got to this island, and there was a Belizean fisherman living there, and then it was also infested with sandflies. And it has made me very picky about the islands which we choose. I try and find the most beautiful islands in the world, and certainly we don't have people there. But yeah, so I thought, let's try and find islands. You know, the guy who made LinkedIn said that being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down. And I could have spent the next 5-10 years becoming a bushcraft expert and really refining this. But I figured the quickest way to learn would be to run a trip. I obviously did do some development of my skills before this to a degree, but I got a group of mates together. I said, look, I want to set up a desert island company. Who's in? Do you want to do my first expedition? And in return, like, we'll do it for cost price, and you can give me feedback of what this is like and what you think. And so long story short, I managed to get the islands where they filmed Bear Grylls, the island in Panama, and 8 friends, well, 4 friends and 4 friends of friends came on this trip with me, and they were just like, this is the best experience that we've ever had. You've got something here that's going to be really fun. And then, yeah, that was the dropping at the deep end, and then we developed from there.
Was it easy to get those first 8 people to say yes?
Yeah, I think that was fairly easy. Yeah, I think real adventure almost starts when things go wrong, and when the road ahead is unwritten. And so they liked the aspect of this being, truly an adventure. We of course had the safety nets in place. We had our satellite phone and boats on standby, and medical qualification to deal with any injury. But yeah, no, they were well up for it, and it was still one of the best trips.
And that also confirmed for you that you wanted to make it into a business.
Yeah, absolutely. It made it really clear that this is something that can work. And I set it up initially as that passion project. I thought, I can do 2, 3, 4 of these a year. I'm going to get to hang out with people. I'm going to get to go and see beautiful, untouched nature. And then it quickly became apparent that this is scalable to an extent, and that it can really be my real job, and something which I run with.
And I know you have other trainers, other people that support these trips, but are you going on all the trips a year? Last I heard you were doing 5 of these trips, sort of pre-COVID.
Yeah, so I only do 4 or 5 myself. I do have a 4-year-old kid and a wife, and yeah, that is my cap. That's like 60 days a year away from my family, and I wouldn't really want to do more than that. So we have other instructors. The main one who runs our Panama trips is a guy called Tom McElroy, who's, if you go on YouTube and look up survival, he is one of the best bushcraft teachers in the world. And when you watch like Bear Grylls and Ed Stafford, he's the guy behind the camera passing the right word, saying, rub this together and you'll get fire. And I've been just deeply grateful to have him as a mentor. I must have spent about 150 days on desert islands with him now, and always learning from him. He's a supremely talented guy.
Yeah, and I think I heard that he helps you pick the islands as well. Like you were in Tonga. I listened to an interview where you met someone in Tonga. You were checking that out to see if that was going to be one of the islands, and it sounds like he was there with you. So does he help in that sense as well?
Yeah, exactly. We've been scouting islands together. He's always joking, like we'll be kayaking back from an island with the sun going down. It's like, Jesus, Tom, I always find myself in the most romantic situations with you. We've had some really cool adventures, and yeah, we're both like craving getting out there and getting back into the wilderness when the pandemic lets us.
Yeah. And so let's talk about your picking of islands, because you have to have this sort of Goldilocks zone. They talk about the Goldilocks zone for exoplanets, for planets that might have life in other solar systems. It has to be not too close to the sun, not too far away. And it's kind of sounds like the same with islands. It has to be just this perfect, right mix of stuff. So tell me about the islands themselves.
Yeah, that's the term I love. So, I mean, we have to be close enough to tourism where it's not a complete pain for people to get there. They don't have to travel more than like 20 hours or so. And we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support the expedition and that we've got a good hospital or clinic within 1 hour boat journey should things go wrong and we have an evacuation. And we also want to have nice hotels. Like when we get off the island, we try and find the best hotel there. So 4-star becomes 8-star, accentuated once you leave the island. So you've got to have that basic infrastructure, but it can't be too developed in that you have boats coming past and tourists turning up. So like as much as Thailand offers so many wonderful islands, unfortunately that it is just too overrun with tourism. So we have to go and find islands that meet that criteria. But then also like that's just one piece of the pie. We have to make sure that the southern Philippines has got wonderful islands, but we have piracy down there, and people get kidnapped. And you also have to consider, like in Indonesia, there's some wonderful islands, but there's also pit vipers, and so we have to really weigh up islands for their safety as well, and also enough resources to be able to run the expedition and big enough to have the carrying capacity for our trips. And we can't really do more than say 4 or 5 trips on an island per year, otherwise we'll start to deplete its resources, and we're mindful of that too.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of surprised that nobody's ever sort of already done this. That there's no way for you to just like get the information that you have to like go out and see for yourself. I don't know. It seems like you're in this day and age, it seems like it would be easy to find the right island.
I know. You think there'd be like a wiki travel. I use various resources for finding them. I won't go into all my like secret sources. But, you get a lot of yachties that share their blogs of remote islands that they can only get to by yacht. And also I use Google Maps. And one of the things I'll do is like notice, well, you can lay a grid of airports and use that as an initial radius point. And then from there, I am giving away my tips. No one copy this. And then from there, you can see where the islands are, and you can also even see like the wakes of boats from satellite imagery, and you can say that is way too populous because you can see all those boat wakes and things like that. So, yeah, that's the fun. Like that's the really fun part. You feel almost like a Bond villain, like going over satellite imagery, looking for islands.
Well, when I was a kid, I would just spend hours looking at the atlas, just collections of maps, imagining what it would be like in a certain place. I would, get the topography and sort of see like, oh, people, obviously here, there's a city here because there's this river and this mountain range and like a port and all this stuff. And so it's sort of, yeah, this is when I was like 11, 12 years old, figuring all this stuff out. And, but now we have Google Maps, and you can really study what a place is like. It's such a fantastic tool. And I've found, we did this expedition when we were living on Bali. The girl I was dating at the time, I took out all the topographic maps and found all the waterfalls that were not sort of popularized, that were not sort of listed on Google, but I could see from the topography. So we did this, multi-day expedition where we went to all the secret waterfalls of Bali. And it was so cool because there's, no Westerners there. So it was like, I didn't even geotag them on Instagram because I didn't want anybody else to be able to find them.
Nice. That's such a good way to do it. I love it.
Are you worried at all about that you'll disrupt your own solitude by bringing people here, and then all of a sudden everyone realizes, oh, this is a great island, like maybe we should build resorts here, and then all of a sudden there's boat traffic and everybody's there?
I don't feel like I'm the leading cause of that, and it is something I always factor in. Like the island in Panama I use is up for sale right now, and apparently a buyer might go through and they will build a resort there, and it breaks my heart to imagine that island any different than just completely pure and natural. But there is always going to be that slowing expansion of tourism, and we know that our islands will only be good for 5, 10, 15 years perhaps. I guess the one saving grace of COVID for us is that it has slowed that expansion that is kind of going to consume islands over time. But we're secretive of the islands we use. You won't see the names of them. And so, yeah, we try not to give away where we are, and we ask people not to share the names on social media and stuff like that.
Yeah. Have you thought about just getting your own island?
I've spent way before this, when I was again hating my software job, I was always on privateislands.com, and just the concept that you could buy islands just fascinated me. And yeah, I've looked. I'm in no way in a financial position to be considering buying islands. And as a company, it just makes sense for us to rent them on a per use basis. But it is a dream. I mean, the other trade-off is that I do spend a lot of time on desert islands, and it is quite nice to not always have the sand between my toes. But yeah, that would be a pretty cool cherry on top of life, to buy your own private island at the end of the list.
And we're talking about tropical islands because, marooned on a desert island, but the new islands that are being discovered are because of the ice melt in the north of Canada. So that's where your island buying opportunities really lie, I think.
I didn't know about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, the satellite images didn't necessarily pick up islands. It was just all under the polar ice caps up there. But now the Northwest Passage is opening up, and there's a lot more. Oh wow, a new island that doesn't even have a name yet. You could probably name some islands.
That's very cool. I could segue into the North Pole bit. When we did the expedition, we were told where we were starting and where we were finishing, but we were given these nautical charts because we're walking on the sea ice, and there would be islands obviously between us and the 380-mile finish line, and we had to kind of again assess the topography and work out, should we be going over that landmass, should we be going around it, what's the best way to do it. And also nautical miles are really painful to tick off. They're very slow.
Nautical miles. Okay, what's the difference between a nautical mile and a mile?
So I think I just started that without confirming. I think it's 1,800 meters is a nautical mile and 1,650 for a regular mile, but please fact check me. I could be wrong, but they're nearly double a kilometer, I believe. And
okay.
And yeah, I think that's what it is.
Interesting. Yeah. Now I'm gonna have to go and look up why we have two different units of measure for that, like how that came about. But so let's get into this expedition, because if I understand correctly, this was a sort of a big turning point in your life.
Yeah, for sure. I was working a job I hated. I was I was a failure really as a kid. I came bottom of my school. I was the fattest kid, and I'd always and obviously wanted to shake that off. And I guess I had things to prove to myself. And I was working this job, and I was like, I don't want to be pigeonholed as a software salesman. Come on, there's got to be more to life than this. And I was drunk with a mate in Brighton at a pub, and he said, I'm going to walk to the North Pole. There's this company that facilitates these races. Would you be up for it? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Completely forgot about it. And then a reminder the next day said, walk to North Pole. And I was like, oh yeah, I've agreed. I've committed to this. And he ended up joining the army and dropping out, and we had other people join our team. And the hardest part is actually getting to the start line. We had to raise £20,000. We did 22 different fundraising events. We had to train at like 5 a.m. before going to work and 9 p.m. after work other days. And I won't lie, I was like, can I just break my leg and not have to do this without saving face? It was just all consuming for 2 years of my life. But eventually we got to the start line, and it's a complete amateur race. There's 8 other teams, and we were a mixed team of 3. I was with a couple, and yeah, we walked to the North Pole, to the magnetic North Pole, the 1996 magnetic North Pole.
Wow! And so in those 2 years when it wasn't really fun, what kept you going?
I don't know. I guess it was just this. I've always labeled myself as a bit of a failure, and I kind of had to keep on pushing through to shake that off. I feel like I'm obviously deeply grateful that I did now, and it ended up being a real watershed moment in my life to push through that. I couldn't really. I guess my mum was very supportive and encouraging, and I guess it's saving face. Like I just didn't want to let people down and let myself down. I don't know, just some grit somewhere.
Well, tell me about what does this mean of failure as a kid? Did you feel like that, or was it like other people's judgments of your achievements? What does that mean exactly?
I think raising a kid, I'm very aware of labels. Like if you tell, if we were saying to my son he was clumsy, and then I was like, we can't say that, because if you do that, you can almost, that label can reinforce itself and become permanent. And yeah, you know, I was very fat. I was the fattest guy in my school by a long way, and I was also bottom of all my classes and all my year. And my nickname was Bum. Like it was not looking good. And I guess that those labels that are on you perpetuate themselves, and it just, you know, you accept that that is your place in the pecking order. You are that person. My teacher even said after I left my school that the only way that Tom Williams will ever get to university is if he climbs through the bathroom window, and then he'll probably get stuck. um, and genuinely true. And I did make it to university, but yeah, what again, the catalyst for change there was I was very lucky. I still had those hang-ups, and I got to university and managed to end up doing a year of university mapping coral reefs in Honduras and collecting data on coral. And my real passion is geography and marine ecology. And that, I think, leaving and being for 7 months, being in a new social situation without all, I love my friends to bits, but I was pigeonholed by them, and I guess having that removed from my life for 7 months allowed me to grow in confidence and ability and self-belief. And I think you know, if my son is struggling with things like that when he's growing up, I'd love him to go and, like, you know, work on a turtle nesting retreat in the jungle or whatever it may be, not in the jungle, on a beach. I think that can be really powerful for people to escape.
So it sounds like it was the first time when you went to do your marine biology, was the first time that you sort of got to be free from the identity that other people were imposing on you and be yourself to a greater extent?
Yeah, exactly that. And then when I came back, I felt empowered as a consequence, and also just really passionate about what I was doing. And I ended up like smashing my thesis, my degree on marine ecology, because I'd never really enjoyed learning and had passion for it, but suddenly I just couldn't get enough of writing about coral and marine ecology. And so it made it very, I guess another learning was, if you love what you do, that it's quite easy to apply huge amounts of time to it, and you don't have to focus on things that you're not good at, that you don't enjoy. Like as soon as you can identify that stuff and work on it, then success can follow.
I want to put a bookmark in talking about marine ecology because I studied abroad in Australia on the Great Barrier Reef so that I could become a marine biologist. I was going to school in Minnesota, middle of the country, no oceans in sight. I want to put a bookmark there, but there's a thread that I want to explore here, which is so this first trip of marine ecology started to free up your identity, and then the polar expedition, it was like you wanted to prove something to yourself, and you stuck it through largely because you wanted to show up for other people. And so after those two, did you feel like you could finally be you, or at what point were you after the polar expedition?
Yeah, I think after the polar expedition, I suddenly had a bit more like self-worth and confidence. I was like, I have walked to the North Pole, and that's pretty cool, and I can be proud of that. And yeah, I definitely was able to. Yeah, it elevated my self-belief. And I think if I had not have done that, I'd never had the confidence that I was worthy to set up Desert Island Survival. Why should I do it? And so it was deeply beneficial for the logistical aspects of the company, because we had to learn how to be extremely organized. You can't make mistakes out there. Everything has to be militant in your pulk, your sled. You have to know exactly where things are in a snowstorm to pull things out in emergency, etc. So the logistical aspects were really useful. But yeah, just that self-belief that I'm worthy of setting up this company. I have a reason that I can be this person that does it, I think was huge. But it's just all in your head.
Yeah, and when I look at confidence, I have this working on this big psychological theory of the adventure mindset and how it ties in with confidence. And there's confidence in a lot of different ways. Could you characterize the type of confidence you felt? Like you said, I felt worthy, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about how you felt confident.
Really, it justified it. It just felt like it made it acceptable. And when people always say, "Oh, were you in the military? Is that why how you got the skills to set this up?" And it just, I don't know, it just gave me enough self belief to to move forward with it. And also, I think because I'd achieved it, I felt like, you could, if you apply yourself to something, things will happen as long as you have enough grit and determination. I think I learned that lesson as well. And I think the other thing is that when going through, after the North Pole was by far the hardest. That was the best and the worst thing I've ever done. Like, you live the highs and lows of a child in a way. Everything is either amazing or terrible, and we burst into tears or feel like we were on ecstasy within like space of 10 minutes. And your senses are so heightened from that. And I think having that deep adversity at times when, at one point we walked 52 hours without sleeping in a snowstorm, that just makes everything else still attainable. And you feel like, when you've expanded your comfort zone so broadly, and then you just are living in that kind of small oscillation internally, if that makes sense, then things become more attainable, I guess.
52 hours without eating in a snowstorm?
Oh, we were eating. We had like frozen cheese and frozen salami and chocolate and nuts, and it was called a nose bag, like a horse has, and you just kind of you feel like a horse. You're just putting this into your mouth and walking constantly. Is
it like tied? You're just like bending down and nibbling? Is that?
Oh, we just had a bag in my. No, not actually a nose bag. That would have been quite good. It had protected from the wind as well. But no, didn't rig that up. Unfortunately, it was just in my pockets.
There's oh gosh, I'm trying to think. There's some cartoon movie. It's where like they put the food on a stick and hang it in front of the animal so that it's like
right.
Chases.
The carrot.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 52 hours, there were checkpoints which were obligatory, where we had to have a medical and check that we could continue, and you had a 12-hour rest at these checkpoints. And we just got to the second checkpoint. We had 100 miles to go to the finish line, and we were in first place, and we were 3 hours ahead of the team behind us. And then we were like, right, if we let our guard down, they're going to win. If we just don't sleep and we just go for it, because it's perpetual daylight as well. The sun doesn't set at that time of year in April, so you just you get a 4-hour sunset and it circles around. So it was like, if we just keep on walking, and this is the last thing we've got to do after this 2 years, then we've done it and we've won. And after 25, 30 hours, really the sleep deprivation started to set in. We all started hallucinating quite considerably. We all had a fourth person with us that wasn't there. There was the polar bear that wasn't there. We were hitting our skis together and shouting at this piece of ice. I'll send you the photo. It's so convincing. I still think it looks like a bear, I swear. And you could see it digging through the snow for seals. But that really hallucinating very strongly. Twice I fell asleep walking. We'd conditioned ourselves to it's very easy to give up mentally. It's very rare that you give up physically, that your body just simply can't do anymore. We always go, oh, that's hard, it hurts, I can't do it. And we have really conditioned ourselves to get to that point where we would only give up physically. And twice I fell asleep walking and just fell into the snow. It was quite intense.
That's remarkable that you kept willing yourself to walk even though you were falling into the snow.
Yeah, we had accountability with each other. One of our things that our personal trainer had done before was to, like, if we'd be doing 500 lunges or 500 squats, and if one person failed or gave up, then you had to do press ups for them. And so you didn't want to fail because your friends had to do press ups and things like that. So we had really built in this accountability to each other to not give up.
What was going through your mind in the middle of those 52 hours?
To be honest, I don't know. It's like a daydream. It feels like lucid dreaming. I don't, again, emotions were just all over the place. We were emotional wrecks, and I don't know. It's the Churchill line of, when you're going through hell, keep walking. And it was just always just get one more footstep in front of another. And finishing the story, we were set to win the world record by 2 hours, no, 5 hours, sorry. And we were so close to the finish line. People were watching at home because we had a GPS transponder. And then this snowstorm picked up, and we were walking into this really strong wind, and suddenly our skis no longer had purchase. The skins on our skis were beginning to slip backwards, and so we're like, oh, can't actually move forwards. So we had to take the skis off, put them on our sledge, and then we were sinking into the snow in like 6 inches every step, which, as anyone who's walked in snow can attest, it's so tiring. And so it ended up taking us 7 hours to do what was meant to be the last 2 hours, and we missed the world record by 2 hours and 20 minutes. But we still won the race. But it was the last 7 hours or so were just the grind of grinds.
You know, I had a similar but less sort of total time experiment. We were this was my ex, and we were out on it was a Valentine's Day expedition, and we ended up getting caught in a snowstorm in the backcountry in Montana. We were trying to make it to this rendezvous point, which was a fire tower, and the snowstorm, it was really a wet snow, and so it did the same thing, but it just built up on our skis, and we couldn't use the skis anymore. So we were walking essentially post-holing, but we didn't have adequate sort of food and water because the other people had that, and we didn't have a map. So we were like counting on the trail, and all of a sudden, you know, we're just in the wilderness in the dark in a snowstorm with no trail. And so the last 1 mile took 5 hours or something. And we could eventually we could see the light of this fire tower, but we couldn't figure out how to get there. And it was like one of those slow motion runs in the movies where they're like, our friends are like, hey, come on over here. And we're like, we can't even get to you. Like, we don't even know how. And we're, trying our best to not fight, and licking like our last little bit of like energy gels, just to, like, have a little bit of sugar. Like if we can maintain brain function, then we can cooperate. But it sounds like you were already way past that point entirely.
That's the most similar experience. You can obviously really relate to how horrific it was, because that sounds almost identical. That's amazing.
Well, and it was, because I'm an Eagle Scout, and I have a Wilderness Survival Merit Badge, and I was like, I can get out of any situation. And that was the one time when I was like, I might not get out of this. Like, I'm going to have to be really resourceful here. And there's something interesting about the psyche of a civilized person, which is like, I'm totally safe all the time. Like, nothing's going to eat me. I will survive. I can get the food. It's downstairs. And there's this comfort. And then when you get to the edge and you realize, like, ooh, this is a precipice of like where survival might not happen. It's a totally different experience.
Yeah. I think it's really important we forget how much we've come on from our primitive hunter-gatherer state, and we still have that same physiology, and we still have that same brain chemistry, and I think it's one of the things that I really love that our trips offer is that ability to go back to that primal state, and that re-appreciation for just how wonderful it is to be able to open a fridge and get your food, and running water, and come back and have that revived appreciation for how cushy our lives are, really.
Yeah, let's wrap this polar story with what happened at the end. Did you get airlifted out of there?
What man! Like? So there's like a bell tent waiting for us at this, but they weren't expecting us to turn up. They assumed that in that storm that we'd have just pitched our tent, and so they'd gone to sleep. And we were looking at our GPS, and we're like, it must be here somewhere, but we couldn't hardly see. The visibility was terrible. And then we spotted this tent, and we woke them up, and they're like, oh, you guys. And it was really unceremonious. There was meant to be like a finish line and stuff, but none of that happened because of the storm. And then we couldn't get our tent up because of the wind, so we got into their tent. That's quite a big bell tent. And then I still feel like it was a bad dream. But 2 hours later, after falling into the deepest sleep of my life, I can't tell you, they wake us up and they're like, guys, we need your help. We need you outside. We've already lost two of the guy ropes. The tent is beginning to lift. We need you to come and help us to secure the tent. I was like, you have got to be joking. This is the sickest joke anyone has ever played on me. And yeah, we had to get out there. I was useless. I was just kind of flailing in the snow until they said you can go back in and go back to bed. And then I think I slept for like 18 hours after that. But yeah, that happened. And then we ended up being stranded at the finish line for 7 days because of this storm, because there's bad weather and you need to have good weather obviously there and at Resolute Bay where we were flying back to for the plane to get us out. And so we're on these half rations, which were only 2,000 calories a day, and we had been eating 8,000 calories a day. So our body felt like it was going into this deep starvation. And we spent basically a week there, just so hungry, lost a lot of weight. I lost like 12 kilos in a month. And one of the cool things is up there's this old outpost. It's like they say it's a weather station, but it's basically just a flags from Canada saying "Come no further, Russia. We have a building here," and it has a weather rating of 99 out of 100 in the Canadian scale or whatever. And it was on Top Gear. They walked around it, and you can basically there's like these little warehouses and a few strange stilted buildings, and so we walked out to there with our shotgun on our back, and we were able to like walk around this really cool buildings, and you could open, obviously nothing's locked, and then you go in there, and wherever there had been just like the smallest kind of hole under a door and a window pane, snow had just managed to get in there over like 20-30 years, and you had like these unbelievable like big quavers of snow on top of lights and on chairs and stuff. I've got these really rad photos of this bizarre like indoor snow scene in this place. So we hung out there, and there's a crash plane that we walked around and got some cool pics there. But yeah, we just basically killed time and got hungry.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about how when you think you're done with something, this could be in the gym, you're doing reps or, TPS reports or whatever it is, and then someone piles more on you and you're like, oh, I just can't, you like have this finish line in your mind and you get there and then there's more. And, that can be harder than the whole, thing. You budgeted this much mental energy, this much endurance. So it just seems like that would have been excruciating.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was only tiny, but it was, as you say, like that final straw. And that's what military training often does, isn't it? They say, right, you fill the hole in one more time and it's done. You guys can, go and have beers now. And then they say, nope, you're coming back and you're digging it out and you're filling it 4 more times or something like that, and just using that to kind of break people's psyche of never feeling like a job is done or that you can check out.
Yeah. And the finish line, was that on land or sea ice?
I don't actually know. I'd have to look at the map. I feel like it was on sea ice because we had to have a nice flat runway for the plane to land. So we filled they filled black bags with snow and marked out a runway. So I'm pretty sure that would have been the sea that we're on. But I remember seeing some land around there, and we had caribou and musk oxen as well. I remember seeing them, like a lemming.
Did you want to eat one?
I wasn't feeling it. I don't know why. I wasn't identifying them at food that stage. I probably should have.
So I'm going to try to transition us to talking about desert islands from cold to warm. And I just finished this book by Neil Strauss. It's actually 12 years old by now. It's called Emergency, and he's preparing for all these different survival situations. And he does a test run of a sort of collapse of civilization, and he's testing being holed up in his house for 3 days, but his assistant forgets to tell him the exercise is over. Like his assistant's supposed to come by and be like, okay, the emergency's over, but he forgets for days. So it's, instead of 3 days, it's like 6 days, and he doesn't know when it's gonna end. And that's actually very, it's more realistic in that sense, this mistake that his assistant makes. And I know that when you're on the desert island, you give people 3 days and then they go to this nice hotel. And have you ever thought of sort of making it so they didn't know exactly when they would be rescued?
Yeah, it's definitely come through. It's come across my mind for sure, and I really notice how people adapt to knowing that they have that finish line, and they maybe don't make so much effort in that final day to feed themselves because they know the food is coming the next day. It's really hard to do, obviously, with the logistics of flights and such. But I would love to put more, free radical kind of situations into it for people to have a few curveballs that surprise them and that they're not planned for. But no, it's not something which we've actually managed to implement, unfortunately. That reminds me of the Japanese soldier who was in the South Pacific, and he stayed on an island for 27 years after World War II finished because he didn't believe that the war had ended. And they even had his family like calling for him, and he thought it was the enemy, making up voice recordings and stuff. I'm
Oh
sure you heard about
wow.
that guy. Yeah,
He was
no.
just like, I just rather be here anyway.
Yeah, it was all a ruse.
Wow. Did you meet that guy? Is he living on one of the islands that you?
Oh, no, no, no. I think he's probably long past. It was like 1944 to the 60s.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Okay. That makes sense.
yeah, he may be going.
And so, okay, so you're desert island because 3 days. Okay, I was thinking 3 days. They learn, so they're on the island. They get their skills for the first 5 days, and then you send them out for the final 3 days. That's almost short enough where you wouldn't even have to eat if you didn't want to. If you just wanted to sit on the beach for 3 days, you could probably survive.
We had a guy try it,
Really?
and yeah, he was like, oh, you just loot some. In fact, it was the very first one, so he would never normally necessarily do something like this, and he was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to lose some weight and not eat for these final 3 days. And he came to me. We're on the island during those final 3 days, just kind of out of sight. And he came to me, was like, I can't do it, man. I need to tap out. And I was just like, it's just because you're hungry. Few things play with your emotions much more than, and your mood much more than hunger. And I made him a hot chocolate, which is not something you'd really normally have on a desert island, but literally that sugar input that just brought him back to life. And he just like powered up to 100, like, right, let's do it. I'm going to catch some fish. I'm back in the game. So yeah, you'd be amazed though. I mean, so many people that book will also say, you know what? 5 days training, 3 days isolation, survival phase doesn't feel like enough. Could we do 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or could I really extend those final 3 days? And we played around with it a little bit at the beginning, but we've really found that formula works, and it's amazing how long 3 days. People, unless you've done like a silent retreat or something, they're not used to, I guess, that reduced stimuli of 3 days. And of course, you still have your responsibilities to build your shelter, to get your fire going, to catch your food, to get your water. But that 3 days really does feel like a long time to people, and it feels just the right amount to really be intensely feeling that experience. But without it, I guess, with it still being exciting and not dragging too much and being too formulaic.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the experience of time, because when you're doing, when all you're doing is like getting water, shelter, and cooking, and you're just, there on a beach, there's not much to do. So it's like, a few times a day, you sort of go through this cycle of feeding yourself. But there's not much else other than your thoughts. So in one sense, like there's this repetitive nature of like, exactly what you're going to be doing. You wake up and you go through your day. But then there's this other, just like, there's no technology, there's no other things to pull your attention. So your attention is pointed inwards. Is that where the length of time dilation comes from?
Absolutely, yeah. So in the first 5 days, it's kind of action. It's survival light for people as well, and we're teaching them all these skills, and it's all really new, and everyone's meeting each other, and we have a lot of fun. We pass around bottles of rum in the evening, and for 5 days, I guess it flies by, but it's still, people say, wow, I can't believe how much time there is in a day when we don't have our technology and our standard distractions. And also just how nice it is to not have electricity, and to return straight back to our circadian rhythms of rising at sunrise and going to bed just after sunset, and kind of resetting in that way. But yeah, the contrast between, it feels like 5 and 5 at least. The final 3 days certainly feel more like 5 days for the castaways, for sure. It definitely warps. But it's not, no one ever says it's boring. Like there's always stuff to do. There's always things that need to be seen to. It's just a case of, it becomes hard for people to find that motivation. They're like, right, I've got to spend 400 calories going down to the rocks and fishing to maybe get 0 calories in return, or 2,000 calories. Is that a worthy trade-off I should be making? And obviously we encourage everyone to like just go for it. But yeah, time definitely warped big time on the island.
So survival skills they're learning. It sounds like fishing, setting up some type of shelter. Like what else? What else do they learn from you guys? What else do they need?
So fire is a big one, and I think it's really empowering to learn how to make fire by friction. So we teach people just the basic mechanics of making fire. It's amazing how many people might put green wood or green leaves on a fire without realizing that you need to obviously have dry wood. But yes, we do like a bamboo fire saw where you rub bamboo together and ignite. We do the classic hand drill, that archetypal single pole. We do the bow drill fire, which is what people tend to make and then take into the isolation phase, and they have to get that fire going through bow drill. We do a fire thong as well. So yeah, we have a good focus on fire. We help them to identify different food sources and wild edibles on the island. We do walk around, and also point out dangerous flora and fauna as well. Like in Panama, we have an apple called the manchineel, which is the most dangerous tree on planet Earth, and like one of these apples, like a crab apple, will kill you. So really important to know about those. And then yeah, we just teach lots of generic kind of bushcraft skills, like making cordage from plants, and making ropes, building traps, snare traps and fish traps, how to distill seawater into fresh water, how to get water from plants. And some different islands offer different bushcraft skills as well. So in Panama we have clay, so we make little clay pots and we do a clay bake with the fish and stuff like that. So yeah, there's like a real variety.
What's the I don't know how to distill seawater into freshwater. Can you talk about how that works?
Yeah, so there's it's amazingly, like, one of the differences of surviving these days. We've got less fish in the ocean. Like, I can't imagine what it was like 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, trying to catch fish in those days. But the trade-off we have is, of course, plastic. We have huge amounts of plastic on every desert island. The most remote, Point Nemo, the most remote part of the Pacific Ocean, is littered with plastic, sadly. And so you can take 2 plastic bottles. It's quite hard to explain in audio, but you can create a very primitive solar still with a plastic bottle where you put seawater in one, you cut the other one, the top of it, and basically as the water evaporates, it gets caught higher up and condenses, and you catch that little bit of fresh water. It makes like 25 mil of water, but if you have 50 of those on a beach, which is really easy to do in half an hour, that's life. You need to have your, if you can get 400 to 500 mil of water, then you will survive. During the final 3 days, we don't mess around with water. Like, we don't want kidney failure on our expeditions. And so we give people sufficient water for the trip, but we teach all these skills as well. And there is one other way. You can use a glass bottle, 2 glass bottles, one on a fire, kind of insulated a little bit with sand, and another one next to that bottle, like neck to neck. And as the seawater in one evaporates, it condenses into the other one, and that will yield like 50 to 100 mil of water an hour or so, if you're attentive.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like a little mini weather system in there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. But you give them the water, and what are the what's sort of like the biggest emergency or like tightest situation that you didn't expect that's come up?
It was me, Derek. It was the I mean, I've had a guy stand on a stingray. He got the barb through his foot, but that was fine. He just put his foot in hot water, and it breaks down the toxins, and that was day 1, but he was okay. We had a guy put a fish hook through his finger. We had to go to a clinic, and you can't pull it against the barb. It had gone past the barb, so they had to cut the eyelet of the hook off and push it around and have an exit through his finger. But yeah. I, on the first night of the 3rd ever expedition I ran, we always have an assistant instructor because of safety. And in this instance, the assistant was basically it was like a mastermind with entrepreneurial group from Denmark. And he was my assistant instructor, but his bushcraft, he was more there for safety, but his didn't really have the broad skill of bushcraft skills that we always now have. Anyway, on night one, a rainstorm came in, and I was splitting some bamboo, and I macheted the tendon in my finger and cut through my finger to the extent where I went through the tendon when I was splitting this bamboo. And it was excruciating. And and I had to run this whole trip on my own. After I lay in the hammock that night, just like popping codeine, just like, oh Jesus Christ, what have I done? I'm like, how am I going to continue? Do I get Tom from California down on the next flight to get on the sat phone? Can I carry on? The next day I went to the clinic. I got it stitched up. And they're obviously like, yeah, you can't do anything with your hand. And I was like, well, I kind of got to. And I kind of I popped more codeine, stoically carried on. And I was like doing bow drill demonstrations where you got to put a load of pressure with your hand. And I could feel it like pop open and the blood was dripping off my elbow. I was like, must continue, must make fire, must make sure the clients are happy. So yeah, that was fucking horrible. Like that was the worst island experience I've had to date. But they all gave 10-star reviews. It was an awesome trip in the end, but man, that was dark.
10 stars. Tom will bleed for you to teach you how to make fire. Oh my
God. We'll go the extra mile.
Wow. Well, let's flip that around. What are some of the peak moments that you remember from these trips?
I think what I love is just how much a tribe gets on. Like, when people arrive, they're all just like, oh, who's who, and it's a little cagey for the first like half a day to a day, and then just I think something about that immersion in nature. Everyone, your cortisol goes down, your serotonin goes up. Everyone just gets in a really good place. Everyone is just so good to each other, and you end up just. And going through adversity together, people just get on so well. And we get, we've had billionaires on the same trip as a plaster and builder from Manchester, and your money is worthless outside the island. And seeing how everyone just galvanizes and gets on in this common goal together to to feed themselves, to build shelter, have water, and the kind of parties we've had on those first nights together, we have loads of WhatsApp groups on all these trips where everyone just still gets on so well. I think it's that human aspect of just seeing the joy in people and what people get from it is what makes it really special and what I love the most from it.
Yeah, I can totally relate. And when I was in the Boy Scouts, we go on weekend camping trips, but the best moments were these 2-week-long expeditions where it's just your crew of 8 guys. And you're out there and you've got all your, everything with you, you're gonna be back in 2 weeks, but you're just, canoeing or hiking or whatever it may be. And, so one of these times it's kind of funny because somebody has to be the leader of the group. So one time I got voted the leader, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And so they have like, the counselors, the support staff kind of go with you for your first day, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, okay, tell them to do this now. And I'd be like, okay, guys, do this now. And it just felt really fake. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. But then after that, he's like, okay, you now know everything, on you go. And I can sort of imagine like, these people on your desert island trips, they learn their bushcraft and then you send them loose. And it might feel like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I just learned this stuff yesterday. But then you go through it because that's what's happening. That's what's in the present moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk about the transformation that people go through, and one of the things that you and I were chatting about beforehand was just this process of slowing down, the simplicity of being in nature and shutting off all the other annoying things that society and culture is demanding of us all the time. So there's 2 parts here. One is I want to hear like what changes people have made in their lives after going on the desert islands. And I also want to hear your perspective on, exactly what's going on. So you can start with either one.
Yeah. So I guess I start with what's going on first. So we set up these experiences just for what it is, to to live as a castaway and to learn really cool bushcraft survival skills and get immersed in nature. No way did we set it up to create transformational experiences where people reflect, but it's just very quickly become apparent that that is one of the really nice added benefits of the trips. I think that immersion in nature, it definitely does something to our brain chemistry. As I was mentioning earlier, our cortisol levels go down. We live in a heightened state in cities. Like, is that bus going to get me? We're always in that kind of slight fight or flight way, and that goes away in nature, and it just makes us feel better and happier. In fact, there's an amazing study of this hospital in Pennsylvania. They had 50 people who had surgery. I think it was gallbladder being removed, and they half of the group had a view of a brick wall, and half the group who were recovering, convalescing, had a beautiful tree vista. And 100% of the people with tree vista healed faster than those who just had a view of a brick wall, which it's astonishing. And I love that. And there's not, I don't know, I love it when science proves woo-woo otherwise, if that makes sense. I love that there is empirical data that shows that is beneficial to us. And they also use less pain medicine and such. And so, yeah, it's definitely really, that's good for us. And the other thing I find is the stepping off this kind of hamster wheel of life. We're always busy. I'm as guilty as anyone. I'm always on my laptop, my phone. I'm organizing stuff, and it's the day flies by. I'm very poor at being mindful and just sitting there and meditating and enjoying my scenery. But the island forces you into that. It's unavoidable, and it's really great for us to have 8 days without our phones and be immersed in nature. And I think taking away that noise and distraction and leaving that constant hamster wheel is a really excellent way for us to just get perspective on life. And only when all that clutter and noise is removed, you kind of get that clarity, that distillation of like, oh, you know what, that is important, and maybe I should be doing that. And you know what, when I get off the island, maybe I'm going to do more focus on that. And again, it's not something that was intent, but it's just something that really seems to happen. So to answer the second part, we've only run 14 expeditions, so we've had like 100 people come on our trip so far. We're still really young. Yeah. But I've had about 4 people quit their jobs and go after like their passions, and that's a big one too. A lot of people have that niggling with them, and like, I should be doing this, or I wish I could. We always make excuses, and I think it's really helped to push people off that ledge and to make that leap of faith. You've got to obviously have some kind of safety nets and structure and such, but it's really helped for people to make those bold decisions. And we had a guy leave his wife. We had a guy who's become a really passionate environmentalist, and he'd never, I think seeing the plastic is very impactful for people. He's now much more considered about the natural world, and very vocal about that as well. And we had a guy who was a bit overweight and just kind of quite lazy. He was the funny guy in the group and everyone loved him, but he just never really helped out and stuff. And then he kind of had this epiphany. He's like, wait a minute, I'm the lazy guy. And you're like, of course you are. I'm about to say his name, but I'm not going to. And he has now signed up he runs ultra marathons, and he is just on it. And I can't take all credit for that anyway, like this experience, but it definitely feels like we've had a lady who was quite overweight, and now she's just done like a 30K race. And she's lost a ton of weight. And so, I guess, there's been quite a few nice examples of transformations, and it's great. It's gratifying. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, it's reminding me of, I did 4 days of Vision Quest before I became a dad for the first time. I went up to the mountains in Montana and just went up to high elevation, like 13,000 feet or so, and just sat there and fasted for 4 days and just sort of meditated and walked around the lake. And I was really expecting something to change. I was expecting for some big insight. I was expecting to get something out of it, and I didn't. Which is okay. It was just like, a very calm and peaceful experience. And I got to know the tree squirrels really well. They harassed me basically. They were just throwing stuff at me the whole time. Which is funny. So, I kind of, if I was doing something like this, I would probably expect a big change to happen.
Mm.
It was interesting that it didn't for me, but I'm happy to hear that that's happening for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I don't know how much pay attention afterwards. Like, I was talking to a friend last week who's just come back from a silent retreat that he said was by far the hardest thing he'd ever done, and he was really paying attention to what changes he saw, and he'd just been back with his family, and he's like, you know what? I just feel like I'm more patient than I've ever been with people, and I'm an active listener, and I guess that slowing down has helped him to do that. And you know, maybe you already had those attributes,
Or maybe maybe
weren't
something changed, but I was
aware.
too busy to notice.
For sure, possibly.
Let's before we wrap, I want to talk about something that I think we both probably love: marine biology, marine ecology. I want to hear about where you studied.
Yeah, so I mean, I studied at Bristol UWE. I did geography and environmental management, and it wasn't meant to be about marine ecology. And I didn't do a marine ecology degree. I just happened to do this sandwich year mapping coral, and wrote my dissertation, my thesis on the effects of scuba tourism on coral reefs. And so I was just doing, I was scuba diving twice a day, 6 times a week, and just living underwater, taking these transects of coral cover, of invertebrates, of algal cover, and of fish biodiversity, and yeah, collecting that data and from 2 different sites, and comparing them, and didn't really find much difference, to be honest, was the conclusion. There's nothing too stark, a few broken corals and such, but that really, the value it gave me is just having, instead of seeing a coral reef, you start to see personality, and you start to see same with some of my botanist friends. Instead of just seeing a forest, they can see all the individual characters, and I think bringing that to life, and understanding that broader depth of it, and also just being able to identify different fish when we catch them and stuff is really useful. But yeah, it's nice to.
And where were you doing this study?
It was on Roatan in Honduras, like off the tip, away from the tourism initially.
Gotcha. Okay. So you were just you came up with this thesis, and you were down there studying and scubaing every day and collecting the data of just comparing certain metrics of coral.
Yeah, we didn't know that. I didn't know what my thesis would be. I think they say that the title of your thesis is the last thing that you write. And we went out there, and the project moved after 3 months, which is just ideal. So I had 3 months of data from one location next to the tourism, and 3 months from as far afield as possible. But there's too many variables, just from anything from higher silt levels and turbidity in the water that would just have a bigger impact than tourism at one other end of the island. And so it's very hard to get perfect. You'd have to have 2 coral reefs a bit closer together, but one that just simply was not allowed to have any boats around it and scuba diving. So yeah,
and so
I don't think it's a perfect species.
When you're out there on the islands with your guests, are you weaving in your expertise of the reefs?
Not really. I mean, I think just when it comes down, we do we go out, we do Hawaiian sling spearfishing, so just like a primitive sling with a little bungee loop, and we go out and we do snorkels over the reef in the afternoon every other day, or at least every day, at least every other day. And so then I'm able to go down and give a little. I worked as a dive master as well, and I'm able to give like a little tour and help to bring to life a bit of personality of the reef as well. And so yeah, I guess a bit.
Scuba diving is one of the skills of a well-rounded adventurer. So there's this series of novels written by Clive Cussler, and he calls them Dirk Pitt Adventures. The main character is Dirk Pitt, and he can fly a helicopter. He knows martial arts. He can fix anything. He's a scuba diver. Like he can do all these things. And so I based a lot of my own character off of this character in the book, and I was like, well, I gotta become a scuba diver, because you never know when you need to like escape from captivity by scuba diving your way out. And so I learned scuba diving, but it really is. I mean, when you spend a lot of time underwater and you can really start to study, and what you're talking about is seeing the personality, and really understanding. It's different than the nature program showing you like, oh, here's this really cool thing that these corals do, but it's like you see how it's all fitting together, how the fish are
Yeah.
chomping on the coral and they're pooping out the sand, and the sand and
Yeah.
the, and then the the trees along the shoreline are preventing the runoff from
Yeah.
the mangrove swamp is sort of the buffer between the inland water and the reef, and it's like you start to see this whole elaborate complex system. At least
Yeah.
that's what happened for me.
Yeah, it's really nice. There's that Netflix documentary, My Octopus Teacher, where he lives and breathes that time on in the ocean, and it's amazing that if you put enough hours into it, classic 10,000 hours, that you really start to understand in a deeper way the relationships that are going on underwater. You really stop and look.
That's a good recommendation. I've heard other people recommend
nice.
that movie.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really mindful, and it's just wholesome. You call it.
Yeah.
On the adventure of scuba tour, a documentary I really liked from like 12 years ago. I'm in near Playa del Carmen right now, where we have all these cenotes around us, and there's a BBC documentary called Secrets of the Mayans, and they because you're saying about it being adventurous, and I always feel fairly casual, the kind of scuba diving I've done mostly, apart from a few like night diving stuff. But these guys were mapping the cenotes, and they were starting well inland in the Yucatan, and then it would go down, and they would try and see where the water was moving and try and find a pathway to the next cenote. So these are these big limestone holes, for anyone who not familiar with them. These like kind of almost like a sinkhole where you go down one lake and they'll try and pop up in the next one. And so these guys were finding these little cave passageways, and then sometimes it would get so narrow and small that they would have to take off their BCD and push through their BCD in their tank, and then keep their regulator in their mouth, and then like follow it and push through. And it's just and anyone who's claustrophobic, it's horrific. And then they would pop through, and then they might be in like a sailor cline where you have different density of water, and it's all misty, or you get these like sulfurous layers where it looks like you're about to go on the bottom, but it's just a sulfur cloud, and you kick it up and you're completely blinded underwater in the sulfur cloud. Like, I can't imagine. Anyway, at the very end, they map the cenotes, and at the very end, like the relief when they pop up in the Caribbean, they look back and they see this beach and the coastline. It's just like, oh, thank goodness I can breathe again. But it's a really cool documentary.
Oh wow! There's a quote about cave diving, which is when you're at the farthest point in of a cave dive, so you're what 1/3 of the way through your oxygen, you're farther away from help than the astronauts are on the space station.
Yeah.
Which I have my cave diving certification. We have a lot of limestone caves and springs. You have to dive through the opening of the spring here in Missouri, and it's like once you kick up that silt, it's just blackout conditions. It's crazy.
Man, that scares me.
You gotta follow that thin little string back out to the opening.
Wow.
Let's wrap here with I don't know, is there anything we haven't talked about the actual desert island trips that you haven't mentioned that you'd like to, or whatever I haven't asked you about that you think is important?
No, not really. It's been a year of hibernation for us. It's obviously been very quiet with the pandemic, but we're looking like we're going to have a full schedule of trips in 2022. We do trips in Panama, the Philippines, and Tonga. Tonga's difficult to get to, but it rewards you because we swim with humpback whales before the expedition, which is pretty immense. But no, I think each of our islands has different personalities and bushcraft skills, and that you can learn there. And it's a really just a beautiful, edifying experience. I guess I should plug the website. Not that this is a plug, but desertislandsurvival.com is the company that.
Oh yeah, I entered your contest.
Nice one.
I saw on Instagram you have a contest for one of your Philippines island.
Yeah. The Philippines Tourist Board are paying for flights, and we're paying for a trip. So yeah, it's more fun, and the Philippines are working with us on that. It's really cool.
Nice.
Did you do a photo? I didn't see a photo. That one.
I haven't done that yet.
Because you can get one entry the way you did, and you get 20 entries by recreating a desert island survival scene at home. So we've had some really fun entries, and up until the end of the month we're taking entrants for that.
That'll be fun. I should do something with my kids. That would be a fun.
Yeah.
Because we're in a snowstorm right now, so that might be a fun project.
Yeah, you should do it, definitely.
Well, Tom, thanks for coming on the show. It's been really fun.
Well, thank you, Derek. Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.